So we have a very special presentation tonight. I'm so glad that you all are here to be a part of it. So it is our distinct honor and pleasure here at FIRE to be presenting FIRE's inaugural Berkson Courageous Colleague Award. So this award was created to honor faculty who have stood up for their colleagues' rights to academic freedom and freedom of speech and expression. So we are very proud to present this award to Dr. Mark Berkson. So just to briefly provide a little bit of backstory, some of you may be aware in December of last year, so a controversy arose at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota, when reports started circulating that the university non-renewed an art instructor for showing medieval artwork of the Prophet Muhammad in class. So in the following weeks, we came to know that this art professor was Dr. Erika López Prater, who is with us tonight. We're very glad to have you here tonight. So we chose to create this award to honor Dr. Berkson for his efforts to publicly defend Dr. López Prater's rights to academic freedom and freedom of expression against Hamline's administration. Yes. And most especially because it's the administration that continues to employ him. So that's a very courageous act. So we are inspired by Dr. Berkson's convictions and his courageous display of collegiality and his efforts to defend those foundational principles at his institution. We hope that others will be inspired by his actions, by the courage that he has displayed. We know there's a lot of problems facing universities today, and our universities really could use more people that have courage to stand up for what is right and what is important. So on behalf of FIRE, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I am deeply honored and grateful to FIRE for this award, and more unbelievably, for creating it in my name. It means more to me than I can say that the award comes from FIRE, because I've come to understand and more fully appreciate this organization's importance through the incidents of the past year. Even before the controversy blew up at Hamline University, I admired FIRE for their commitment to principles that are important to everyone, but are in a special way the lifeblood of the university, where the nature of the academic enterprise, the inquiry into every and any subject with all of the methodological tools at our disposal, tests the freedom of speech and expression regularly. FIRE is there to call out the suppression of speech and to remind us of the importance of standing up for free speech, even when we disagree with it, and even when doing so poses a risk. And I've appreciated that, philosophically, politically, legally, but only now do I understand what it means when it's personal. Now I understand how important it is to the people right in the middle of a crisis when FIRE issues a statement. It's only after this entire painful experience that I know how much FIRE's support means to someone who feels alone, or is being silenced, or threatened, or punished for exercising their right to free speech, for expressing their point of view, or in the case of my colleague, Professor Erika López Prater, simply for ethically, responsibly teaching their subject matter. In addition to my feelings of gratitude when they told me about this award, I felt totally overwhelmed. That is the most precise word. I never contemplated something like this. It felt like too much, to be honest, and my deep appreciation was accompanied by a certain discomfort. And in fact, I wrote FIRE's Director of Faculty Outreach, Comey Fry, expressing this. This is not some kind of like false who me, like humility. It's genuine. As I thought about this award and I felt that sense of discomfort, I reflected on it and I realized that there are 3 reasons for my discomfort. First, I was literally just doing my job. I was hired and am being paid in large part to provide my expertise in religious studies, including Islamic studies, to the campus community, both inside and outside of the classroom. All I did was provide written and spoken arguments with what I believe to be solid reasoning and evidence on a topic in my field. And I stood by my colleague, Professor López Prater, because all she did was teach art history. In this case, educating students about Islamic and Persian art in a world art class, as promised. So how can I let her be criticized, labeled, investigated, and punished for doing this? I supported Erika because I could not do otherwise. While teaching certainly takes knowledge, skill, passion, and dedication, we now see it also requires courage, because soon Erika found herself a target and a scapegoat, forced to defend herself, accused of committing an Islamophobic act. Her actions as an educator were labeled an act of intolerance, and in fact, her teaching of the kinds of paintings shown in museums and taught in classrooms around the world was investigated as a possible hate crime. We live in a time where faculty can face the loss of jobs, condemnation by their supervisors and their students, and endure hits to their reputation with an impact on their careers just for teaching their subject matter, even if it's done in accordance with the standards of our profession and the supposed protection of academic freedom. So yes, teachers from primary school to graduate schools must have courage in the face of threats from the state, university administrators, and elsewhere. We face risks just for teaching our students to be informed, educated, critical thinkers and communicators. So the first reason being recognized like this made me uncomfortable is that I was just doing what I'm hired to do. But the second reason is that through this entire experience, which is ongoing for those of you following the chronicle of higher education, throughout the whole experience, I have never once felt courageous, truly. Reflecting on my entire emotional ride, I came to a realization. Courage is unlike some virtues, like loving kindness, hope, compassion, or empathy, which generally involve a particular feeling that accompanies the actions that arise from it. But if Fire is right in using the word courage, it's clear that no courageous feeling ever accompanied anything I did. So what did I feel? Well, here's what the experience felt like to me. Upon first finding out that a vice president, the chief diversity officer of our university, labeled the teaching of the painting Islamophobic, the same painting I've taught many times, a painting created by a Muslim artist for a Muslim king, my feeling was one of disbelief. After all, this professor, I had learned, had given warnings to her students in the syllabus and orally in class so that they did not have to look at it if they didn't want to. So I called the VP just to make sure I understood his statement correctly. Well, I did. And then I wrote him an email explaining the painting, the diversity of Muslim views on representation, providing context. I explained that this was in no way Islamophobic. I thought that would be the end of the problem, and obviously it was not. The feelings that came next, and that have driven me throughout much of this process, are variations on anger and outrage. Now, believe it or not, I am actually a conflict-averse person. I do my best to mediate conflict. I don't like the feeling of anger. But over the last year, I have learned an important lesson about anger. It can be a driving force. If it can be harnessed, and if it's an anger that arises from a refusal to accept injustice and unfairness, an anger grounded in the defense of principles, it can play a positive role. Still, I long for the day when my university has an administration that's committed to principles and willing to recognize mistakes, apologize, and take responsibility. I would rather have less to be angry about. So my journey involved disbelief and anger, but there were other strong feelings that were far from courage. And I have to admit that I went through some periods of self-doubt. I never doubted that our administration was treating my colleague in a totally unjust way and violating her academic freedom. But still, I experienced two kinds of self-doubt. First, after this big community conversation where multiple attempts were made, ultimately successfully, to silence me, and virtually all of the responses I received to everything I'd written and said were either hostile or silent, I began to wonder if I was missing something. It was surreal. And how is it that among our campus leadership and diversity staff and everyone else in that room during the conversation, there was not one person who saw what I saw? So I started to wonder, what am I missing? If showing this painting was Islamophobic, then I had been showing it for 20 years. That would apply to me. So it was at this time that I reached out to someone who helped, Todd Green. He has dedicated his life as a scholar and activist to combating Islamophobia. He's a leading expert in the field. I've used his books in my class, but I'd never met him, and he didn't know me. So I wrote him an email and responded right away, and we had a conversation. He listened to the context, and then he said, well, they just don't understand the academic study of religion. He cut right to the heart of it. And he reassured me, of course there's nothing Islamophobic here, which was helpful, confirming for me that Erika's treatment was as unjust as I thought it was. The second kind of self-doubt occurred as I was lying awake at night, wondering what kind of trouble I might have brought upon myself or my family. In addition to bracing for any possible consequence to my reputation or career, I realized that I had been publicly denounced by a leading Muslim activist as someone supporting blasphemy and Islamophobia. There were nights where I was haunted by the thought that I might have put myself or my family at risk. And it was at this low point in my period of self-doubt that FIRE's statement was issued. And when I read that, it was profoundly uplifting. Their statement helped carry me through the next difficult period, which involved the criticism of a group of Muslim students, including the leadership of the Muslim Students Association, the MSA. They campaigned to stop students from taking my Islam course. Now, I had dedicated a good part of my teaching career to teaching students about Islam in all of its myriad expressions. And I saw what I was doing as a teacher of Islamic studies, in part as a way to combat the ignorance and stereotyping that drive Islamophobia. On the last day of class every year in Islam, I tell my students, you now know more than the vast majority of Americans about Islam. You're all teachers now, so if you hear someone say something false, or if you encounter a stereotype or overgeneralization, you can skillfully challenge it. You can use it to raise awareness. And I deeply value having Muslim students in my class. They add a valuable perspective that I don't have as a non-Muslim. Muslim students often tell me that they learned a great deal about the tradition that they never knew. So I'd worked really well with the MSA for years, and now, in the course of a few days, I was seen as a villain and accused of supporting Islamophobia. Muslim students were being told to avoid my class, and there were people on campus with whom I had worked well for years who would no longer speak to me, and still don't. So there was a very unpleasant brew of emotions that accompanied me much of the time, but nothing that felt like courage. So I came to see that courage is more of a third-person attribution than a first-person feeling. What is key is not the feeling, but the action. What matters is persisting regardless of how one feels or what befalls one. So I truly appreciate FIRE seeing my actions as an example of this, as it never felt that way to me. Finally, there's the third reason that this award made me uncomfortable, and that is because my name is alone on the award, when if it should be there at all, it should be accompanied by a number of other names. At the very beginning, I was worried Erika and I would be alone. And I remember assuring her that I wasn't going anywhere, but if it had just been me, I don't know what I could have done. Fortunately, it wasn't just me. I soon got to know a remarkable individual who has seemed to me at times to be truly fearless, Professor Christiane Gruber at the University of Michigan. She's a leading expert on Islamic art, particularly figural representations of the Prophet. She had done years of field work in Iran. So I remember my first Zoom call with Erika and Christy and me, and Christiane had this intensity and confidence about her, and she looked at us and she said, I'm going to write an article about this. It's going to change the narrative. And I'm going to start a petition on change.org, and it's going to get thousands of signatures. And the media is going to pick this up, and it's probably going to be in the New York Times. And it all came to pass. Christiane is, as my students would put it, fierce. Then came the important contribution of Professor Amna Khalid of Carleton, who wrote a powerful, insightful piece called As a Muslim, I'm Offended, with the actions of Hamline's administration, it turned out. With this piece, Professor Khalid demonstrated, both with her arguments and her personal example, the diversity of Islam. Having a Muslim voice supporting academic freedom in this discussion was a turning point. And it's worth recognizing that it's often people within the traditions in question, in this case, a Muslim taking a public stand on an act that some members of her community would consider forbidden or even blasphemous, who exhibit courage most powerfully. And I also appreciate the contributions of Professor Omid Safi at Duke University. Professor Safi, in interviews on national news, brought an expansive knowledge of Islam, a strong commitment to academic freedom, and a deeply spiritual Islamic practice to the conversation. He's a principled defender of academic freedom, but he makes his case in a patient, gentle way that I aspire to but fall short of. And all of this inspired me to persist. And I appreciate present and former colleagues who've been there with me at my lowest points, including Ida Aude and Kate Bjork. But there's one person whose name I always want associated with this award, and that is Professor Erika López Prater. It is possible that all of the suffering she experienced could have been avoided if Erika had just apologized for teaching that painting and vowed never to do it again. If she had just said she'd committed an intolerant act and she regrets it deeply, it would all go away. Now keep in mind, she did apologize for the fact the student was upset because she saw it, and Erika indicated regret that it had happened, but despite pressure, she wasn't willing to go beyond this and apologize for actually teaching the painting. She might have kept her class, avoided being vilified and punished had she just acquiesced to the demands of administrators and students. And she is a vulnerable adjunct professor, keep in mind. But she would not apologize. She stood up for the discipline of art history, for the right to teach, for the students' right to learn, and for academic freedom. And the impact was not only on her, but her whole family. What happens to anyone who finds themselves a target also impacts their spouses and children. And I am so glad she can be here tonight, as she truly displayed courage and should share in this award. So I would like, Erika, one more time, please stand so we can express our appreciation. And just as Erika's family had to deal with everything that she went through, so my family was impacted too. My children, Alex and Ruby, but above all, by far my wife, Laura Medin, who experienced every moment of the last difficult year with me. I am profoundly grateful to Laura for her unwavering support, her encouragement, and her advice. I would never send any piece of writing out into the world without her sharp editor's eye and her insightful feedback, but it's the emotional support that means the most. Everything that happened to me over the past year has impacted her, and I'm so thankful to her for her strength. This award is truly shared with her. I want to conclude with two final thoughts. The first is about the university, and the second is about FIRE. FIRE originally stood for Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. They have expanded, recognizing the need to defend these rights wherever they're threatened. But I value their origins in the educational sphere, particularly colleges and universities, because these are among the small number of places where people can, in theory, pursue knowledge, challenge ideas, and explore controversial topics without fear. How many people besides faculty can actually do that? Well, besides tenured faculty, I should emphasize. As Erika's case demonstrates, what can happen to a faculty who lack the protections of tenure. And we should all be concerned that ever smaller percentages of faculty have tenure. So how many people besides tenured faculty and perhaps very brave comedians can openly talk about controversial matters, material that can cause great discomfort in others without quickly losing their jobs? While every American benefits from people and organizations willing to defend these speech rights, it's particularly important in education, especially among those of us who teach controversial topics. In my classes, and this is just within the last semester, we explore the religious uses of psychedelics, attitudes towards homosexuality and Christianity and Islam, the Israel-Palestine conflict, the ethics of eating meat, and just last week, Balinese cockfighting. In religious studies classrooms, we study scholars from a wide range of academic disciplines. sometimes critiquing, challenging, and even aiming to actively subvert the central claims of the world's religions. And we look at forms of every religion that would be considered heretical by some and acts that would be considered blasphemous by some. We challenge our students, they challenge each other, and they challenge us. And that is one of the reasons I love the classroom so much. We learn to work through controversial issues on which there is passionate disagreement skillfully, with civility and sophistication. In university classrooms, I tell students, you will encounter ideas that upset you and some will make you angry, and you learn to manage those emotions and channel them in a productive way. Those are skills essential for a citizen in any democracy that wants to survive. So despite everything that's happened, I feel incredibly lucky to be able to teach. Wonderful things still happen in the classroom. It's a refuge for me, a time when everything associated with a controversy and with our administration vanishes, and we can spend our time thinking and talking and reading about the most important and interesting subjects in the world. Even amidst the lowest periods, there was always joy in the classroom for me. And over the past year, I've been very critical of Hamline's administration, with good reason. But I wish I had a chance to talk more about what I love about Hamline. The problem is, people around the world have been reading articles about what Hamline University said or did. Well, when you read Hamline University in those articles, it refers to a handful of people. It does not reflect the vast majority of faculty, staff, and students. So I want to tell parents whose kids are considering coming, if your children come here, they will be working with faculty dedicated to the open inquiry into every topic we study. And if any entity, our administrators, the state, any group of individuals tries to impose limits on our freedom to teach our subjects in accordance with the standards of our profession, we will fight them, and fire will fight with us. In the immortal words of Mick Jagger, don't you play with me because you're playing with fire. So please, whenever academic freedom or free speech is stifled on a university campus, and you're reading about what that university said or did, remember, the actions of the administration or one group of students do not represent that university. My final comment is about FIRE. I really appreciate the nonpartisan nature of FIRE's work. Their commitments to the principles that are there to protect everyone across the political spectrum are essential. And there are times that I read a FIRE statement, then I go to learn more about the person they're defending, and I must admit, I sometimes say like, I don't know about that one, you know? There's some really disturbing views. And then, of course, I'm immediately reminded that not only must I extend the same protections I seek to those with different views, but in a way that can often be difficult to see at the moment, we benefit from hearing those views. And this occurs within every religious tradition I teach when we see how much is revealed when we juxtapose what is considered orthodox with what's considered heretical. And when we see how worldviews are shaped, principles affirmed, and understandings clarified by the engagement with, rather than the silencing of, opposing, even offensive or disturbing points of view. The principle that FIRE defends in all realms is articulated well within Religion by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who wrote, "Religion is at its best when it relies on strength of argument and example, is at its worst when it seeks to impose truth by force." And this is not just some contemporary idea. 16th century Rabbi Judah Loew said it beautifully. He wrote, quote, "It is not proper that we despise the words of our adversaries, but rather we must draw them as close as we can. Therefore it is proper out of love of reason and knowledge that you should not summarily reject anything that opposes your own ideas. Even if such beliefs are opposed to your faith and religion, do not say to your opponent, 'Speak not, close your mouth.' On the contrary, you should at such times say, 'Speak up as much as you want, whatever you wish.' Curbing the words of an opponent in religious matters is nothing but the curbing and enfeebling of religion itself. What strength is manifested when the opponent is not permitted to fight?" To close, I thank FIRE, not only for the work they do as an organization, but for the way they inspire individuals to speak up despite the costs, and for supporting them when the costs are exacted. And I especially want to thank Comey Fry and Sophia Lopez, who have been so supportive and helpful every step of the way. Their efforts made the whole event possible. So thank you so much, Sophia. And finally, insofar as I did anything deserving the name on this award, remember, it is in large part because of the people I named, including Erika herself. So I hope that when someone thinks of this award, they think not only of my name, they should think of this as the López Prater Grouper Khaled Green Safi Medin Award, or whatever order makes the best acronym. And keeping in mind that fire itself bolstered me at a key moment, we should remember that the award they give also belongs in part to them. Thank you.